Senator Elena Parent, thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
I am delighted to be. Thank you so much for asking me. It's an honor.
So this week, crossover day is in full effect. How are you feeling right now?
We have bills flying a mile a minute in the state Senate. It is quite overwhelming, trying to keep up with everything that's coming at us as members of the minority party, and yet still try to have our message on economic security for all Georgians get through in a positive way.
What is that message? We know that in the Senate and even in the House on the Republican side, a lot of the legislation is really lining up with what we're seeing coming out of Washington. What is the Democrats' message?
Yeah, I mean, we have been trying to point out that the Senate, which I obviously can speak to with more authority, has been spending the vast majority of its time on what I would term as kind of like culture war bills that the public does not want us to focus on and simply are not their priorities. The public is concerned about the cost of health care, prices, economic security, cost of housing, and the Democrats are trying to talk to Georgians about the things that we have filed, the legislation we filed, that is getting buried by the Republican majority.
SB 50, I know that that's one of the bills that you were sponsoring surrounding Medicaid expansion. Can you talk about just kind of how that bill is doing right now and the push to provide that healthcare coverage for Georgians?
That's right. Georgia is one of very few states that at this point has not accepted an expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. And that is simply hurting Georgians because Georgians already pay the taxes associated with that law, and the benefit is not coming to us. Governor Kemp rolled out a very limited expansion a year or two ago called Pathways. And I applaud him for trying to be innovative, but unfortunately it has just been an abysmal failure. The program has spent, over $30 million with at least 70% of that going to consultants and not actually to get folks health care. Only about 4,000 people have been able to sign up.
Would you say that there is a road to combating that this session and making sure that those Georgians who need that health care the most are getting it?
We're really facing resistance from the governor. The Republicans I work with realize that it's far past time that Georgia expanded Medicaid, that it's what makes the most financial sense for our state, and certainly it's the right thing to do for our citizens. But obviously, there's only one governor in the state, and he certainly has a lot of power, and it is something that he's very firmly saying we will not do. And it's just a shame because I don't know if Georgians realize the vast amount of money that is being wasted going to consultants and not to getting Georgians health care by his intransigence.
You feel that the money that is being routed to those who are hired to help solve the problem could just go directly to the people? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And the amount that we spend on ensuring every one of those 4,000 people or 5,000 that have managed to get through the bureaucratic tangle of Kemp's Pathways program, it would be a so much better deal. We would spend so much less getting health care under Medicaid for all those folks. We're spending vast amounts of money on consultants, and it's frankly just a scandal.
Since you mentioned the governor, I want to ask you about a bill that you did vote no on. That was SB 68, Governor Kemp's top priority this session. Yeah. As a former litigator, and I know that there's difference between litigation and trial lawyers, but with litigation, you do see these settlements. Some of these larger settlements could, in the governor's words, crush some of these businesses, raise insurance premiums. Do you feel, when you were a litigator, is that what you were seeing? Were these businesses getting crushed by these huge payouts?
What I would say is there are many complex factors that go into making up the American judicial system. And if we were going to have an honest conversation about actually trying to bring down the cost of the litigation system for businesses, for people. There are a lot of players that we are going to have to touch that we simply are ignoring with this tort reform package, right? And that includes the insurance industry. Florida, for example, did pass some litigation reforms. They also have been far more vigilant and forceful than Georgia in trying to use the regulatory power of the state to get better consumer results through their insurance regulator, which we simply are not asking of our insurance companies. There's also judges and the way they play into the system, and the behavior of the way businesses handle it themselves. So frankly, if there is some notion that this is going to vastly change the supposed problem or solve it, I have to respectfully disagree with that. I think that when you're only willing to talk about, one small part of a much larger conversation, the results simply aren't going to be there. And that's why litigation reforms such as this around the country have not yielded the results that the governor claims that he's looking for.
Now, we do know that that bill is going to move over to the House side.
Yes.
Do you have a message for your colleagues in the House on this bill?
The Democratic caucus has been very concerned about the negligent security piece, that it would, the way it's written, it's drafted very poorly, in fact, almost encourage businesses to be hands-off and negligent towards keeping their facilities safe and making sure that customers are protected from crime. And that really needs to, the language in that section has got to get fixed and narrowed some, or we are sending a message to businesses that they, as long as everyone else around them is similarly negligent with not having security, not having lighting, not having fencing, that everything will be just fine. It goes way too far with some of the concern that insurance companies have, that recent cases out of the Georgia Supreme Court had language that made them feel like, hey, we don't know where the limit is here. That may be totally fair, but unfortunately, this piece has been a priority where the governor's office has really dug in, and they either don't care or don't understand that it is going way too far the other way and will harm not only Georgia customers, but actually businesses themselves. And that, typically the best public policy does a good balancing of those interests. And that piece certainly does not at all.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you want to see that messaging changed.
The message, which messaging?
The messaging for that bill on the House side before it's even considered to be passed or not when it deals with these businesses.
Look, I think that regular folks that have been injured or harmed need to have their day in court. And that's what Americans believe in, frankly. And they understand the power that insurance companies have to manipulate this process. They can and do manipulate this process. And I think they understand that when the supposed solution is a handout to businesses, that something's wrong with that picture. That if you're going to try to solve it, you're going to actually have to grapple with all the causes. And if you only want to talk about one small part because you don't want to make your friends in the insurance industry angry, which is what's going on here, then that's just disingenuous and also won't solve the problem.
SB 19, the 10-day waiting period for purchasing or transferring a gun. We know that was an uphill battle when you introduced it to your colleagues in the Senate. We know that over on the House side, Speaker John Burns put a proposal after the horrific shooting at Appalachia High School. For those who are watching this interview, those parents, those students, people in and outside of schools that are dealing with gun violence on a daily basis, is there any hope for any type of gun legislation coming out?
It is. Yesterday was the 6-month anniversary of the tragic school shooting at Appalachia High in Barrow County, and unfortunately, my Republican colleagues feel very captive to and cowed by the gun lobby. And we're in an era of browbeating and online mobs. And so I understand where they are coming from, but unfortunately, none of them seem to really be having the courage to try to solve the vast problem we have related to gun violence here in Georgia, which is directly tied to our very lax laws. Not to take guns away from folks, but to have some basic things that some other states have that do have results, right? And so actually that ends up protecting Second Amendment rights. But by being so extreme, they're losing support every day. And I want to talk to you about, a bill I've worked on for several years, which is a safe storage bill around minors. And it sends a message, the wrong message, in my opinion, to the public when it is not illegal to leave guns loaded and lying around around children. And it's just not illegal in Georgia. It wasn't illegal for the father of the shooter to give him a 14-year-old an AR-15. It wasn't illegal. And when your laws reflect the values that you are trying to transmit to the general public. And I would say that our laws are doing that very effectively on guns. They are sending the wrong message, and it's allowing gun extremists to exploit that by trying to get out this message that, you need to have a gun at all times, right? And stand in the way of anything reasonable, like, you know what, it should probably not be legal to give your 14-year-old an AR-15.
And a lot of your Republican colleagues say that the solution to this is not taking away guns, it's mental health, more SROs at the schools, potentially safe storage, but not requiring a law for that safe storage.
Yeah, I mean, they're on the wrong side of the way regular people think about this. Regular people understand that if you're a responsible gun owner, you don't give a 14-year-old an AR-15. You don't leave loaded guns lying around 2-year-olds, right? Guns are the leading cause of death among children. And we could spend half our state's budget on SROs and hardening schools, but none of that will work because the reality is that the individuals doing the shootings are members of that community, and they are allowed to be there and should be there. And you can never overcome the element of surprise.
So you're saying those who are responsible for these shootings are legally obtaining firearms?
Well, certainly the 14-year-old did, but what I'm saying is that in school shootings, for example, the perpetrators are by and large students at the school. They are supposed to be able to enter the building. You see what I'm saying? So you can't actually keep them out. And then you can't overcome the element of surprise, which is, one mass shooting, and this is particular, and I want to make this clear, this is particular to some of these assault rifles, right, that I don't really believe should be in civilian hands, especially not without more controls, right, or at least some restriction. A shooting that I mentioned earlier on the Senate floor this year is one where the perpetrator had an AR-15, began shooting. 20 seconds later, whatever law enforcement present was there. 30 seconds later, it was over, and 9 people died, and 27 were injured. When 9 people can die in 20 seconds, and 27 can be injured, you're talking about something that there's no way an SRO can stop. And we have to be willing to grapple with the easy availability of weapons that are designed to kill as many people as possible, dozens, hundreds, within a couple of minutes. They simply should not be available, and certainly not to anyone at any time. They can spend all the money in the world, and it's not going to stop unless you are willing to think about that too.
It's Women's History Month.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk to you just about the space that you have created for yourself here under the Gold Dome that is predominantly ran by men here in Georgia.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you think that women are adequately represented under the Gold Dome? And do you think that there's more work to be done?
I think there's a lot more work to be done to make sure that women, and honestly, by extension, children and family dynamics, right? Caregiving, as it were, are better represented under the Gold Dome. We've got about 24% of the Senate that are women. Obviously, that's well under our population in the state, which is about 51%. And, you know, I think it's important to note that there's actually only one Republican woman senator. And that needs to change too. Yeah, that needs to change too. Because when that's the party in charge, right? And women are so basically almost not, even though, of course, I very much respect the work that Senator Kirkpatrick does. That's really a big void. In terms of the folks running the show, a voice for women.
Do you think that women's issues get overshadowed at all on the floor because of that lack of presence? Or do you think that your male colleagues do recognize the needs of women?
Some do and have worked on it. And I would say it's somewhat the needs of women. Sometimes it might be more the needs of children. But the reality is that when that perspective is not represented, which it is not in the majority in the state Senate, you certainly are going to miss a lot of the equation. And it just won't. It certainly can't be a priority when 32 out of 33 folks running the place simply don't have that life experience.
And then just on a day-to-day basis, I mean, you've been here for a little bit, so you've seen the changes that have happened throughout under the Gold Dome and other sectors of just Georgia government. When it comes to just like those daily aspects, like we've seen women carry their babies into the chamber. We've seen, people be very vocal about just like the day-to-day aspects of childcare or something as simple as having tampons or something in the bathroom. Yeah. What changes have you seen on that front?
Well, look, I mean, a recent study out of Wallet Hub found that Georgia is still among the lowest states in terms of economic parity for women and being kind of a good place to raise a family, right? We have a lot of work to do. I served on a study about our childcare crisis, a study committee about our childcare crisis, and this is not an issue that is unique to Georgia. It is a problem nationally, but the reality is that the economics of childcare simply don't work for the vast majority of families because they don't make enough money to be able to afford quality childcare. And meanwhile, because they aren't able to pay those sort of tuition amounts, the workers themselves are also barely hanging on without benefits, making very little money themselves. So the economics of it simply does not work. I applaud the state Senate and the lieutenant governor for recognizing that. We took a extremely modest, I would say, half-inch step forward with a proposal to, I believe, give families about $250 annually. Good. $250 is better than nothing, but it will pay for, it's something like 6 boxes of diapers, right? It's just not going to move the needle. But I'm glad the conversation is starting. The bigger problem is, the programs that exist to try to solve some of this problem. That, by the way, is incredibly important for businesses and our economy being able to function. Because fewer women in Georgia are even working these days because of the childcare crisis. It costs our economy so much money, right? In lost output, lost productivity. These programs exist. When money came down from the feds due to COVID, we were able to move 20,000 more kids into the program. When that money ran out, we just kicked them off. For a program that solves so many of the things that we say we want to solve. Lack of affordable childcare, letting people climb the economic ladder, having women being able to work, getting kids ready for school. All of that is touched by this program. And we wouldn't even spend any significant amount of our $16 billion surplus on that, and that's very telling. It's very telling. Tax cuts for businesses are more important to the people running this place than trying to support working families. And the reality is that's also completely counterproductive in terms of the economy. So,
I know that you have had several healthcare initiatives that you continue to work on.
Right. You know, probably a lot of your viewers don't realize that over half of Georgia counties do not have an OBGYN. And giving birth in Georgia, being pregnant and giving birth in Georgia is a lot more dangerous than in most states. Our maternal mortality rate is still very high. That's directly tied into the lack of available preventive care. And some of the legislation that's made doctors, OBGYNs afraid of criminal penalties if a woman that they're trying to treat starts to hemorrhage or starts to have a miscarriage due to our 6-week abortion ban is also causing more OBGYNs to flee the state. So the problem is getting worse. And I would suggest to you that that's another area where we really need to devote some attention, and the folks in charge need to answer for that worsening problem.
I mean, what can be done? Are Georgia legislators' hands tied because of the 6-week abortion ban and solving the maternal mortality crisis? Of course, there was the Maternal Mortality Review Board. It's kind of in limbo where that is right now.
That's right, exactly.
But
Yeah.
what solutions?
Well, I think you can see from the abrupt disbanding of the Maternal Mortality Review Board that what happened was some members of it apparently leaked some horrific stories about women that died in a way connected to the governor's 6-week abortion ban. And he obviously wasn't particularly happy about that. So he disbanded the whole thing, fired all of them. And now we don't have one, although they claim that they are reconstituting it, right? But this is the treatment that women are getting in the refusal to talk about the real damage done to pregnant women in this state, that law has made it a lot more dangerous to be pregnant in Georgia. Those stories were just 2 women that died immediately after the law went into effect.